So that's Kanota Mage Nene, John Boros. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce John Boros. John?
Miigwech. Buju, Nindinwe Makanidok, Nich Nishnabek, Nich Marzig, Bangietago Ninita Nishnabem, Igujun Jishnamayan, Giganos, Indigenakas, Neashi, Nigaming and Donjaba, Nigigin Dodam. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I have to be able to speak with you today, and thankful for this theme of the conference, Rekindling the Fire. When I think of this, I think of rekindling a flame, a fueling, a continual replenishment, a tending. There's a brightness there. There's a warmth. And with that warmth, there's the power to change our environment and everything around it. It's the power to create fire, but it's also the power to destroy. Ishkode is fire. Ode, it's our heart. We think about the heart of our homes, the heart within us. And we think of that smoke rising as prayers, cleansing and purifying, ascending into the substance of all life around us. And we put it with fire and water and air and earth. And we remember the tobacco, the sweetgrass, the sage, and the cedar. This is the stuff of life. It's the promise of new life. It's bright. It's how we counsel. It's how we do this work together with justice, learning, immersion, beginning. This fire sets us apart. In setting apart, reminds us of agreements and covenants and the creation of sacred spaces. So there's so many things there to be able to understand and learn about our treaty obligations as we think of fire. You know, there's an important aspect to treaties. We learn treaties from our ancestors, and our ancestors are the plants, the insects, the birds, and the animals. They have so much to teach us about treaties. We are their descendants, and they are our elders, and we could not exist without them. You know, they came first, and they continue to sustain us. Both our evolutionary lineage and our biophysical dependence points to this fact. As I mentioned, I'm Nigigan Dodam. I'm from the Otter clan of the Anishinaabe. Neashi Winigaming Donjaba from Cape Croker. Our legal order flows from a creation story where animals counsel together to bring dirt or soil up from the depths of a flooded world. And a giant otter participated in this council. He dove with other animals who sought guidance for further growth. As you know, the muskrat, the smallest diver, brought a paw full of earth from deep below the surface. And everyone celebrated his efforts by seeding this soil as they danced along the giant turtle's back. And in the process, the animals combined what was necessary for life's subsequent generation. And when the giant otter died, the first person of my clan emerged from her carcass. And long after the council's actions spread across the Turtle Island's back, other clans formed in similar ways. That's to say, you know, we are literally, as humans, Earth's literal offspring. We are formed from these clans. We have much to learn from our genesis as treaty people. You can see in that council, that process of working together to bring something up from the depths that allowed for light to hit it, to warm us. You know, countless stories from many societies narrate similar themes, that is, we are born from the earth. In Hebrew, the biblical name for the first human is Adamah, which means the ground or the earth. And the Quran says that among his signs is that he created you from the dust. And of course, we know scientists account for life's origins through natural selection, which says that we're drawn from the elements around us in vast and varied and magnificent ways. That is, our relatedness to the earth has great political salience, and it's a first principle of our treaties. That is, our constitutional genealogy spring from elements found in the natural world. And so we sever ourselves from what it means, from who we are, from what sustains us, if we separate ourselves from the air and the water, and the rocks and the plants and the insects and the birds and the animals and our other kin. Our politics, our sociality, our economics, our ways of being, our life ways depend on respectfully nurturing that which nurtures us, which includes our natural environments. Talking about treaties, right? The living world provides the very conditions from which all our activities flow. That is, we cannot be ever reconciled with others unless we first reconcile ourselves with the living earth. That is, we have to look backwards to life's sources to narrate any political forward. Human words do not precede us. They arrive much later than the sounds of the winds and the waves, the pulses, the vibrations, the drones, the barks, the whines, the growls, the calls and the songs of our first teachers. And human politics, including our treaty politics, needs this as a precondition for healthy living. Something primordial is beyond words, and it precedes us. So the question is, how can we better incorporate these lessons from the natural world into our futures? How might we listen to those that we do not conventionally hear? How can we incorporate their voices, those politics, into everyday life? Well, I think the treaty helps us set the pattern for that work, because these lessons course through the water and the winds. As Sharon said, for as long as the rivers flow, the grass grows and the sun shines. Listening to the natural world requires a literacy that's hard to convey through language. The earth is an archive that we must learn to read socially, scientifically, culturally, legally, spiritually, politically. Anishinaabe people have long taught that we can hear and read beyond words if we regard the earth as our relative and our teacher. For us, earthbound politics must be experiential. It requires listening with our bodies alongside other bodies and life forms from those that are very different from our own life forms. That's a key to civility. Our teachers may have wings, fins, tail, and antenna, then be fossilized or dressed in leaves or fall from the sky in small drops. Elder Basil Johnson, who was a teacher of mine, taught me that we learn governance in these contexts by tuning ourselves to the frequencies that emanate from the fields and the forests and the seas to better regulate our affairs and resolve our disputes. We must understand how the world is connected to us, different from us. He said to me, even this, until you can look at a squirrel and see yourself as no less or more than her, you will not understand our treaties. You will not understand how Anishinaabe are to live. So we recognize that we have these teachers around us and that our views are partial. And we have so much to learn as we understand the beauty of the world. We can better learn from these spaces when we engage with these forces. So I'm suggesting that judgment here about treaties is perspectival. It's formed in councils. And how do councils work? Well, we must see our politics through our neighbors' eyes. Who are our neighbors? Who do we have to see our relationships through? Whose eyes? Well, the butterflies, the frogs, the geese, and the otters. Their habits and their health must be looked at, viewed in ways that respect their intrinsic worth. We must participate with them within environments ordered differently from how humans sometimes construct our environments. That is, we need to become students of the oaks, the salamanders, owls, and the sturgeons. We must do more to learn from those who know them. This is the kind of work of resurgence and regeneration if we hope to rekindle these kinds of fires. It's important to exercise self-determination, but self-determination is not enough to sustain our political goals. Too much focus on the self can lead to insular, closed, and even selfish activities. This can cause us to build walls that contain and divide and confine and prevent and repel and deter interactions which are healthy, necessary to vital living. Placing too much emphasis on the self can cause us to ignore the vital plays of air, water, and rocks as participants in our treaties and in participants in our politics. Thus, yes, we need to advance self-determination, but we also need to see that we are determined by the beautiful world around us. And as we see that, it gives us place to engage with and counsel with and understand our appropriate place in the biosphere, in the wider settings of our lives. We're facing critical challenges of climate change, and treaties give us some guidance around this. As humans, we've seen the climate change in deep time, in human time, in colonial time, and in our lifetimes. Professor Kyle White, who's Anishinaabe, talks about these times. Think about how we've learned climate change from deep time. If you look at my reserve, Cape Croker, Neashiwinigaming, or you follow the peninsula up and you go to Chiging, there on Manitoulin Island, you see these escarpments that were formed 440 million years ago. And where were they formed? They were formed at the equator, at a time when what is now Ontario was a warm, shallow sea, much like the Great Barrier Reef. And through 440 million years, those escarpments rose, and then they traveled as continents drifted to where they are now. People want to put nuclear waste deep in the earth, not recognizing its dynamism and how the traveling of the earth continues to guide our politics. And those escarpments that rise along the backbone of Ontario from Niagara up through Cape Croker, up to Chiging, and across the North Shore and down into Wisconsin remind us of a climate change that is vast in scope. But of course, I've also mentioned we don't only have this climate change through deep time, we also have this climate change through human time, right? Our stories of creation, of recreation, go to about 12, 14,000 years ago as glaciers sat on our territory. And those glaciers were about a mile high, right? And Anishinaabe people were living at the edge of those glaciers. And as they receded, we saw the waters form. We saw the flood. We were there with those animals, the turtle and the otter and the loon and the muskrat and others. And we saw the earth in its indentations, and we saw the earth as it rebounded as a result of those glaciers leaving. Right? Again, people want to bury nuclear waste deep in these soils, but these soils travel up and down, and they're covered over by glaciers every 10, 14, 16,000 years. And that changes us. And Anishinaabe people have a politics, have a treaty, have a relationship through clans that comes from that climate change time. And we have to help people understand our treaties relate to that deep time and that human time. But of course, we also know about these changes in our climate through colonial time. If you look at the past 400 years, our territories have been paved over and planted with cities like Toronto, Chicago, Milwaukee, Duluth, Ottawa, Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa, and Montreal, and all these places in between. Urban heat sinks change the weather in these cities. Indigenous lifeways have been pushed aside and replaced with political and social and economic systems that marginalize environmental care. And so we're prevented from reestablishing or seeing the resurgence of our governance, our law, our ethics as guiding forces in these places. Our fields and our forests and our lakes have been transformed through agriculture, mining, forestry, recreation, and factories, and all the infrastructure that's designed to facilitate these activities. Irreversible loss and widespread death has followed for many species of plants and insects and birds and animals, and of course, Indigenous humans. We have pesticides and tailing ponds and garbage dumps and erosion and invasive species, and they've contributed to air and water and noise pollution, which contaminate the primary sources of life in our territory. They kill our elders, and they kill those remembrances of those treaties. That is to say that humans have lived, that is, Indigenous peoples have lived with human-caused climate change for the past 400 years, and we've been devastated by this. I have family stories from my great, 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 great grandparents, and then all the way through. I wrote an LLM called A Genealogy of Law that chronicles the losses we've sustained as the air, water, and land has been changed by human activities. Think about us in Ontario. What's been lost? The passenger pigeon, the greater prairie chicken, least shrew, eastern elk, blue walleye, gravel chub, short-nosed cisco, black cisco, paddlefish, eastern tiger salamander, spring salamander, Blanchard cricket's frog, frosted elfin, Carner blue, Perseus duskywing, timber rattlesnake, russet-tipped clubtail, incurved grizzly moss, Mawkins shining moss, dwarf umbrella sedge, yellow-fringed orchid, commons prairie grass, wild rye, black oats. These and other species are now extinct in local region, and the list of endangered species grows each year. But our elders tell us that these changes are accelerating in their intensity. We are still living in this colonial time that disrupts and often destroys our relationship with our territories. So climate changes have been brought by vast numbers of people that relate differently to the land that was once more abundant. It's even possible to think of this last category of climate changes. I've talked about this being in deep time, human time, and colonial time. We even see these changes in our own lifetimes. When I visited Manitoulin, when I talk to folks on the North Shore, when I'm home at Cape Coker, elders tell me that the fish run at different times, unusual times. The sap flows from the trees in unpredictable ways, and the strawberry and blueberry and wild rice harvests do not follow the same cycles that existed only 40 or 50 years ago. For elders, climate change is a very personal experience. So as Anishinaabe people living in this inspirited world of treaties with elders that teach us the winds, the rocks, the waves, the birds, the plants, the animals, we need to remember this kinship, which considers duration, span, and movement of the relationship with the natural and human world, and see our laws as life ways that we've learned these laws from all of these beings that create measures, standards, principles, criteria, precedent, tradition, signposts, guideposts, tenets, procedures, conventions, and customs, right? These are the words of law. That is, Anishinaabe people have laws to create better climate governance. And this doesn't just flow through parliaments or legislatures or courts, assisted by lawyers or the police. I'm talking about this flowing from our treaty relationships, those that we know come before us. We need Indigenous law because this law comes from those broader relationships to respect and reconnect with the environment so that we can have a sustainable relation. I want to go back to that idea about fire again, this rekindling, this resurgence. Think about that in terms of replenishment, tending, brightness, warmth, power to create, the power to destroy. This is fire. Ishkode, fire. Ode, heart, the heart of our home, the heart of our bodies. Smoke rising, prayers. Smoke rising, cleansing, purifying, ascending. This smoke rising into the substance of all life around us. Fire, water, earth, air, tobacco, sweetgrass, sage, and cedar. This is the stuff of life. This is what promises new life, burning brightly. What do? We counsel together a round of fire to bring justice up from the depths. This immersion, this beginning, this setting apart, this agreement, this covenant, this creation of sacred space. Miigwech Bizinduig Mi'u Ahau. I appreciate the time that I have to be able to speak with you. Take care.
Miigwech, John, and I think he